Hello, dear friends. Today's video I'm doing in the memory of Simcha Bet Avraham V'iza, of blessed memory, because this is the week of her Shiv'ah, and I wish comfort to the whole Whiteman family. Dear friends, tonight is Tu B'Av, and the 15th of Av is a time in our history which sort of became a festival in the last generation. Some people call it the Jewish Festival of Love. And I'd like to go a little bit deeper into the meaning of Tu B'Av, how it came, what it became, and what exactly is it, and how it's understood. The source we have, of course, for Tu B'Av is taken from the Mishnah and Ta'anit in the last chapter of the Mishnah 8 of chapter 4. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, of course, was the head of the Sanhedrin, said, Lo ayu yamim tovim, there were no other great days or good days, or Yom Tov actually in Hebrew can also mean a festival. There were no greater festivals for Israel than the 15th of Av and the day of Yom Kippur. Of course, this statement is puzzling twice. Number one, since when is the 15th of Av a festival? What festival is it? And secondly, Yom Kippur, is Yom Kippur a festival? Isn't it like, and to say no better days than that? Yom Kippur is a day of atonement, day of taking stock, of introspection. Seems funny. I mean, it is officially part of the Moadim, of the festivals of the year, but it's hard to see it in that same light. And the Mishnah continues, and on these days the daughters of Jerusalem would go out in white dresses that they had borrowed in order not to embarrass those who could not afford them. And because in that time purity was kept, so all of these dresses first had to be dunked in the mikveh, in immersion, in a pool of water, and they would dance in the vineyards. And what would they say? They would say, "Oh, young man, lift up your eyes and see who you choose, but do not look at beauty, look at the family." As it says in Proverbs, Sheker achein, beauty is vain, vehevel av yofi, and same thing, grace is lies and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears God, she shall be praised. And it continues, and then it brings the verse in Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, Sena Orena B'not Zion, O daughters of Zion, come forth and see King Solomon for the keter, for the crown that his mother made him on the day of his marriage and the day of his happiness of heart. The day of his marriage, this is the day that the Torah was given. And the day of the happiness of his heart, this is the day when the temple was built. May it happen speedily in our days. This is the Mishnah. This is the Mishnah. So the Mishnah just says that it was a day of major matchmaking at the time, and then they quote this, and then so it seems that the day of matchmaking there were two. One was the 15th of Av, which in a moment I'll give the historical background for it, and the second one was Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, is that the proper day for matchmaking? On the other hand, it is sort of understandable because on Yom Kippur, you don't have to worry people will be too frivolous. They don't eat, they don't drink, they're davening all day. So if they put aside a little bit of time during that day for matchmaking, maybe people will look to do the right thing on such a day. Well, the Talmud in Ta'anit, in discussion, of course, of this Mishnah, on page 30, talks about 6 things that happen on the 15th of Av. What were the 6 things? This was the day when those who died in the desert stopped to die. What's that all about? You see, in the desert, everything was a little bit unnatural. It was all miraculous. You know, people didn't have to wash their clothes. It says in Devarim, they ate manna in the morning and the quails at night. It was a very miraculous type of life. And even when it came to death, because when you're moving in the desert, you can't just bury people just like that. The Midrash says that nobody died during the year except for on Tisha B'Av. On that ninth day of Av, the day, of course, when the spies came back and said it's not worth going to the land, that day, the night before Tisha B'Av, people would dig graves, they would put themselves in, and those who did not die after Tisha B'Av would just come out and walk home. And the ones who died, they would bury them, always on that day. So Kalu Meitei Midbar means that this was the day when it was all over. Because again, on Tisha B'Av, they had to wait to see who would die and who would not. But when it came to the 15th of Av, the Talmud says, they understood that they would not die that year. Yeah, because they thought that maybe it was anyhow, that's one thing. Kalu Meitei Midbar. The second one is based on the story in the book of Judges, Shoftim. There is a war between the tribe of Judah and tribe of Benjamin over the story of Pilegesh Bagiva, a certain concubine who was raped and murdered, and it created it's a terrible story in the book of Judges, and this created a civil war between the tribe of Judah and Benjamin. And when the war happened, and it was so devastating, and so many people died, that Judah swore never to marry anybody from the tribe of Benjamin again. But after the war was over, they had remorse and second thoughts, and they said, we can't ban a whole tribe of Israel. But on the other hand, we already said we wouldn't. So the heads of both tribes said, look, the ban is still official, but unofficially, we're telling the young people, if you want to intermarry between the tribes, it's okay. Go into the fields, do it at night or during the day when we're not looking. So we'll look the other way as far as the ban, and this is a good time to bring the tribes back together. And this initiated on the 15th of Av, which made the 15th of Av this matchmaking day. Other things, and then of course, this was the same day, not only did it actually happen in this way, but they allowed the tribes to intermingle and to intermarry again. So two things happened, both the tribe of Benjamin and the tribes in general. There are other things that are mentioned on this day. It says that in the northern kingdom, they used to stop people when there was the northern and the southern kingdom from the time of Yerovam ben Nevat. There were guards to stop people from the northern kingdom going to Jerusalem, which was the capital, because it was in the southern kingdom. And on the 15th of Av, they took away the guards and allowed it. And on the 15th of Av, after the failure of the Bar Kokhba revolt in the 2nd century, the Romans finally allowed the Jews to bury the corpses that were sitting there outside the destroyed town of Beitar for months. And on the 15th of Av, it was allowed. And by the way, because of that, we have a blessing in Birkat Hamazon, the fourth blessing about this event. So what does this mean? What does this mean? Let me just point something out. In our calendar, we have two types of festivals. The major festivals fall out on the 15th of the month, which is the whole moon. The whole moon represents the Jewish people. Yafa Kalvana, beautiful like the moon. There are many places where the Jewish people are symbolized by the moon. It's like the 15 kings from David until Tzidkiyahu. You have actually 15 generations from Abraham till David. That's called the moon getting bigger. Then you have 15 kings from right at the beginning, from David until the end of the Judean kings, which was Tzidkiyahu. That's called the diminishing of the moon. And so there are 15 days of the moon rising and 15 days of the moon falling until the destruction of the temple. Symbolically, that's an idea of the Maharsha on the Talmud. So what exactly is this Tu B'Av? If you look on our calendar, Sukkot starts off in the 15th month of Tishrei. It's a full moon. Pesach starts on the 15th month of Nisan. And by the way, they're exactly 6 months apart between Tishrei and Nisan. And then Nisan to Tishrei again. If it's not a leap year, 6 months apart. The other festivals don't. But in a sense, you also have, if we have 7 days from the Torah, which are called Yom Tov, 5 of them fall within the rubrics of what I just said now. For instance, the Sukkot holiday has Shmini Atzeret the day after, so it's like one process. So even though Shmini Atzeret is on the 22nd, but even so, it's like the day after. And so it's linked to the Sukkot holiday. Same thing with Passover. Passover, the first day is Yom Tov, the last day is a Yom Tov. But then when we count those 7 weeks until Shavuot, the giving of the Torah, and the festival of the harvest, it's like a process which only ends with Shavuot. In a sense, Shavuot is connected to Passover just the way Shmini Atzeret was connected to Sukkot. So out of the 5 days in the year, which are called Yom Tov, which you're not allowed to do work aside from the Sabbath, out of the 7 days of the year, 5 of them fall out within these processes. The only exceptions are Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah already falls out on a day which is sort of festive, which is the beginning of the month. When the moon starts, it's called Rosh Chodesh. Just on Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Chodesh is hidden behind Rosh Hashanah. But Yom Kippur is a total exception. It's not really related directly to the Sukkot holiday, but you might say it's a preparation for the Sukkot holiday, and it's not related to Passover. Why were these 2 days called the days Yamim Tovim, these happy days that were no greater festivities, no greater festivals than these 2 days? To explain, I'll try to explain the way I understand it. You see, Rashi explains that in the Torah, the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, were given to us on Shavuot. You see, Shavuot is called the festival of the harvest. The Torah doesn't actually say that Shavuot is the festival of the giving of the Torah. And in actuality, it was not the Torah that was given on Shavuot. Shavuot is the day, the 6th of Sivan, when God spoke the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, to the Jewish people. It was on the 6th of Sivan. The Talmud says it was a Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning. They get very specific. So what does that have to do with Yom Kippur? Well, if you remember the story, Moses is there and God speaks, and Moses is the intermediary at a certain point after the first 2 dibrot between God and Israel. And then he goes up to the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights to receive the tablets, and he comes down on the 17th of Tammuz, and he sees the Jewish people worshiping the golden calf. And he breaks the tablets. That was the 17th of Tammuz of the Hebrew month of Tammuz. And he goes back up for 40 days and 40 nights, according to Rashi, and prays to God, asking for atonement for the Jewish people, and comes down again on the first day of Elul, which is called the month of penitence, to tell the Jewish people that God will forgive them. But we still work on it during the month of Elul. And finally goes up again for 40 days and 40 nights to receive the second tablets, which God says to him, Psolacha, engrave for you the second tablets, meaning you broke them, you fixed them. And then Moses comes down again after 40 days and 40 nights on Yom HaKippurim, on Yom Kippur, and gives the second tablets to the Jewish people. So Yom Kippur becomes Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah a second time. It's the tablets that are given by Moses to the Jewish people. It's a time of mending. It's a time of mending the relationship between God and Israel. The 15th of Av is the day that there's a second mending, when the tribes of Israel are fighting between each other, when Judah and Benjamin, the children of Rachel and the children of Leah, are not getting along. Something we saw much, much earlier. If you remember, Judah sold Joseph into slavery to Egypt with his brothers. This friction, this chasm between the children of Leah and the children of Rachel is a chasm which happens throughout our history. The northern kingdom of Ephraim, of Israel, the southern kingdom of Judea. It's also found when the Beit HaMikdash, you had the temporary Beit HaMikdash in Shiloh, which is the children of Leah, Ephraim, and the permanent Beit HaMikdash in Judah, which is the children, the Shiloh was the children of Rachel, and the permanent Mikdash in Judah is the children of Leah, which is Judah. And so it's also the temporary. It's also the temporary kings. First, you had a king from the children of Rachel, which was Saul, and then the permanent kings from the children of Judah, of Leah, which is David, and that's the way it continues. And futuristic times, we have the two messiahs, one of the house of Joseph, one of the house of Judah. Because they have to get together, as it says in Isaiah chapter 11. I'm going to take two branches. One is the branch of Ephraim, and one is the branch of Judah, and they have to be one in your hand. Because this friction, this chasm in the Jewish people goes from century to century. And it's a friction we even feel today in the state of Israel, but I don't want to elaborate too much on that point at this moment. But what is Tu B'Av? Tu B'Av is the day of mending. The day when the tribes get together and realize if we don't mend, we will self-destruct. If we don't mend, we will implode. Forget about our enemies. There's nothing they can do to us. But we can be our worst enemies. And this is Tu B'Av, after the destruction of the temple. The Talmud says that the Messiah is born or can arrive on the 9th day of Av. With the destruction, God creates the refuah, the remedy, before he brings the plague. So on the 9th of Av, there's already the possibility of redemption. And this can come to fruition on the 15th of Av. But in order for it to come to fruition, there must be mending. There must be healing between the tribes. There must be an attempt of rapprochement between the tribes, and this is Tu B'Av. And therefore, then, when the Mishnah says that verse that I quoted before, Tzena Urena B'Melech Shlomo, look, go out, O children, daughters of Jerusalem, to the King Solomon, Batarashi Tralo Imo B'Yom Chatunato, for that crown that his mother gave him on the day of his Chatuna, on the day of his marriage. Uv'Yom Simchat Libo, and it says the day of his Chatuna, of his marriage, that's the giving of the Torah, that's referring to Yom Kippur, because I said the second tablets were given on Yom Kippur. But what is the day of his Simchat Libo, of the happiness of his heart? That is the building of the temple. Now, a lot of the commentaries say the building of the temple is also on Yom Kippur, because when Solomon built the temple the first time, it also fell out on Yom Kippur. There's a whole discussion about that in the Talmud. But others say differently. They say no. Yom Chatunato, his marriage, that's Yom Kippur, the second tablets. Yom Simchat Libo, the building of the temple, this is futuristic. The building of the temple could happen on the 15th of Av. Because when the tribes mend, and when the Jewish people try to heal the wound between the children of Joseph and the children of Judah, the factionism, the tribalism, then there is a chance for this unity which is symbolized in the temple. And the unity of the temple is not just for the Jewish people. It is something for all peoples. Beiti beit tefillah yikareh l'chol ha'amim, it says in Isaiah, my house is a house of prayer for all the nations. When the Jewish people get their act together, it will have universal ramifications. And that's why it's Tu B'Av on the 15th, because it shows a new pattern, a new process, a new holiday. It'll be the third holiday on a full moon, meaning it will have real repercussions worldwide, just like Sukkot and Passover. And this is the possibility that we have and is within our reach. The Kabbalists of Jerusalem have a tradition And the tradition is that all the problems we have in the Second Temple period will come back when the Jews came back to the land of Israel. And unfortunately, a lot of it we saw. The factionism that we saw in the Second Temple period, the infighting, it's all here. But the idea is that we have the power to overcome. We have the power to heal. Just like on Yom Kippur, when we got the second luchot, the second tablets, it was Moses saying we can now heal our relationship and our faith to God. But Tu B'Av is the time to heal our relationship within the Jewish people. That's why the symbol of this is the matchmaking. Because when a human being joins with another human being and leaves their egocentricity to bring somebody else into their lives and create a family, they have now a chance to create something new. To take two people and make it even more inclusive than just the two of them together, to create something new. And when the Jewish people as a nation are able to mend, are able to be inclusive and accepting of one another, it is a new period in our history. And this is Tu B'Av and what this day means for us. Yom Simchat Libo, the time when Solomon's heart was happy, which is called the building of the temple. Yom Chatunato, his day of his marriage, and the day of his happiness. Yom Kippur, the giving of the second luchot, and Tu B'Av, with a futuristic concept of unity among the Jewish people and international unity symbolized through the rebuilding of ourselves as a nation, and the world at large symbolized through the concept of the third temple. Shalom, shalom.